supposedly written by the Apostle Thomas. It was not. And its purpose was to answer questions about Jesus' childhood. In other words, what did Jesus do? I mean, really, all we know about Jesus between the time of his birth, the moment of his birth, basically, and when he begins his ministry at about age 30, are the few verses that I just read in the Bible. That's it. Now, let me show you what happened. The very early church was convinced that Jesus Christ was going to return in their lifetime. Now, if you know that Jesus is going to return in your lifetime, and they really believe this, then there's no reason to write a book about it. There's no reason to build a church. There's no reason to do much of anything except be spiritually prepared for when he comes. Well, he didn't come. And he didn't come. And he didn't come. And as he postponed that coming, if you will, that second coming, the church then started, as understandably so, thinking more and more and more about Jesus. What does it mean to call him the Son of God? What does it mean to say that he's Lord and Savior? What does it mean to say that he's King of Kings? What does it mean to say that he is the light of the world? What does that really mean? And as a result, when people tried to wrestle with these important questions that we still talk about today, some people took this particular approach in understanding, some took this approach, some took this approach, and so what was happening in the early church, and that spread out, I might add, particularly into Syria, which was a wonderful place for the growth of early Christianity. You had the churches branching out into Syria, and of course into northern Africa, into what is called Turkey, and you had all these growing different understandings of who Jesus is. Now that's what happened. And as these particular theologians or particular schools of thought developed, they started writing this stuff down. Jesus wasn't going to return in their time. They said it's time to start writing this stuff down. And so they wrote down Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. They preserved the letters from Paul. And they started collecting this stuff. Now, as you can see, what would happen is over time, they had literally thousands and thousands and thousands of pages and ideas and books and little letters and comments. Now, what's going to make it in? What's correct and what is not correct? And so that's where we kind of are with the infancy story of the Gospel of Thomas, written to begin to try and fill in this gap of knowledge, or lack of knowledge, that we have between the adulthood of Jesus and his infancy, and his birth, I should say. Now, the earliest reference we have to this gospel, call it that, is around 185, or fully 150 years following the resurrection of Jesus. Though it must have been, this book, rather popular because it caused enough commotion to agitate one of the greatest early church thinkers and early church leaders, Irenaeus, in 185 to condemn it. Now, I don't expect anybody to have read Irenaeus. I'm sure Bob has and a couple people have. But basically what he did is he felt that it was his responsibility to correct bad thinking in the church. And so he wrote a very famous book called On Heresies. And so he said, this is heretical, this is not heretical, this is blah, 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 blah. And he wrote that about 185, and he refers to this gospel in that book On Heresies. So, why do we condemn it? Irenaeus says because it's heretical. And heretical or heresy simply means that it's wrong thinking, in contrast to right thinking, or in other words, orthodoxy. That's what the word orthodoxy means. Now, follow me on this. I want this to be fascinating for everybody, but it gets even more exciting in just a minute, as you'll see. Now, there's a reason why I mention all of this background, and I'm going to get into the fun stuff. Just hold on in just a minute. why is this important, and why is David raising this to our attention? And what I want to do right now, real quickly, is a callback or a referral back to a sermon that I preached a few weeks ago that was dimly praised by this good fellowship, and that's well enough. I spoke of two words that are important to understand, and you'll see why. There's a word called conflation, and that's the combining of two disagreeing themes into one theme. And the other term that I talked about is acculturation, and that's the process where we take our cultural values and then we impose them upon another value to make it our own so that we can feel more comfortable. Now, okay, conflation and acculturation. Follow me. As for conflation, Brenda and I were driving around town the other night looking at the beautiful yard art, and we saw Jesus and Santa in the same manger together. Okay? That's conflation. Conflation. Now, you follow me, you laugh about that. What else did we see? Oh, it was just great. Well, you've seen all that kind of stuff. Oh, it was Santa riding a sleigh. That's a good look, too. And nothing says Savior like Jesus or like Santa in a sleigh. So there's where you take two different ideas and you put them together to try and, I guess, form a new idea, and I guess that somehow Jesus and Santa are the same. Okay. That's conflation, all right? And I talked about a few weeks ago how that was done in the Bible, too, on a couple of stories. But that's another story altogether. Now, then there's a question of acculturation, and I saw it again the other day. I was driving down the road, and I saw this beautiful creche, manger scene. And I looked in there, and I wasn't surprised at all because I'm an American, and I was raised, and I know it's true. Nobody can convince me otherwise that Jesus is white. I mean, he has to be white because he's an American. See? And, but probably, Jesus was probably olive-colored, something like Ida, something like that. Really. Or maybe even darker, heaven forbid. So acculturation, for example, is you want to be comfortable with Jesus. People would have a difficult time with a black Jesus, for example. That would cause a lot of people a lot of discomfort. So what you do is you have a white Jesus, even though Jesus wasn't white, and that's what you put in the manger, white Jesus, so you feel good. Okay, that's acculturation. Now hold on, I'll be doing all right with this, and even though you say, so what? Well, my answer is that the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, written by, I'm quite certain, a devout Christian in either the late 1st century or the early part of the 2nd century, is wanting to fill in the story of who Jesus is between his birth and his adulthood. And so what this writer does is he or she has received all of these traditions, and we know that, about Jesus, and then what he has done is he's taken it and fashioned these stories about Jesus according to his own culture, his own point of view, and he conflates the stories, and he acculturates the stories, and he puts them together into a nice little gospel that is called the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. Now, you say, so what? Well, the truth of the matter is that what you have in the infancy story of the Gospel of Thomas is a perfect example of what a prevailing culture wanted to see and believe about Jesus. And that's important because that's what we have done with Jesus today as well.